Day 295 of the Ukrainian war map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update post as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. And as always, I'll start off with those Russian military losses. So as of the 15th of December 2022, so in the last 24-hour reporting period, there's actually been an additional 590 Russian military personnel losses. So that would be a little bit above average for the moment there. Then a quick look at the hardware losses. So armored combat vehicles, a massive 9 losses there for the Russian side. Tanks a huge 5, and artillery a whopping 12 losses for Russia there too. But let's just focus for a moment on the total KIA for the Russian forces there. So this total figure could indeed reach 100,000 Russian military personnel losses by the end of the year. As some simple math calculations will show that to reach 100,000 KIAs by the end of the year, this means they would need about an additional 227 per day Russian losses on average to reach that mark. I might just pull up the calendar for that one there that I did a little bit earlier. There we go. Which all seems pretty achievable, considering the average KIA for Russian personnel in this war so far has been upwards of 327 losses per day. But to be honest, I'm not even the biggest fan of this blood-bathed calculus, but at this rate it actually looks like 100,000, that figure will occur on or before Christmas Day. So I can only imagine the upcoming Russian KIA memes blasting on the internet shortly. Then we'll move across to the map, and today we'll start out in the Kursk Oblast, where in the last day there has been, the air defenses at this location have been reportedly activated. Also with Russia claiming that it neutralized all incoming Ukrainian projectiles. But I don't know, there's a lot of conflicting reports about that one. So not the least of which is from this video footage aftermath from early the next morning showing a Russian military unit being struck, with quite the fairly sizable crater too. And you'll notice the freshly disrupted dry soil amongst the backdrop of the snowy background as well. Then also in Russia at the Bryansk Oblast, so just northwest of Kursk, is 6 explosions were reported here in the Klinsky location there. And then even further in Russia, so we need to go across to really the east, and in this case that means the west of Russia, and we're talking about the Rostov Oblast here. So a railway line was blown up by a Russian group named Freedom of Russia. That claimed responsibility for that one there. So all this adds to the fact that Russia now needs to contend with battles and defense within its own borders. Something that I bet it never foresaw when it commenced its special military operation, which really makes its military resources quite stretched for an army that's already very well reported to be on low on resources as it is. Then we'll move across specifically into the Ukraine map and the capital of Kyiv now, where there was a Russian drone attack that seemed to fall flat. So President Zelensky announced in his nightly address there that the air defenses shot down 13 of the 13 Shahed drones used in that attack against the Kiev capital this morning. Then we'll move across to the Donbass. So let's have a look here. Now, quickly, we'll take a look at the P66 highway and the town here, Chervono-Popivka. So, which is for the second day in a row now being shelled by Russia, which tends to basically confirm that it is in Ukrainian control, even though these maps aren't yet updated to show that. Then still in the Donbass, there were detonations at an ammunitions depot that was reported after a missile strike in Kadivka. And I can never seem to find it on the map, so I did pop it on the map beforehand. But actually, Russia calls it by its Soviet-era name, normally of Stakhanov. So that one right there, which you'll see is pretty fair distance from horizontally to the front line, you could say, or roughly about 42 kilometers or maybe about 25 miles. Then we'll move across to probably where the biggest fighting is today. So 3 guesses there, Bakhmut. So we'll just see if I can find that on the map here for a moment. There we go. It's jumping everywhere. And so here we are. So where the Russian forces are pushing hard to the east. In fact, east of the town there. And you can see that by this bulge out right there. Quite the little westerly push. But in fact, if you take a look at the date map and we'll go back in time, you'll see it's been a little bit to and fro here. So I'll just go, oh, there we go. So there was a punch forward here for the Russian forces about exactly a week ago, and then it was pushed back again. But for these protruding Russian forces pushes, shortly thereafter, the Russian forces find that they become a victim of their own success, as Ukrainian encirclement artillery fire just pushes Russia back again, or more typically liquidates them in sizable numbers too. And for places like these, there's going to be some haunted houses here one day, I'll tell you that much. Then we'll move across on the map to the Zaporizhia Oblast, where there has been explosions reported in occupied Melitopol. I'll just find that one on the map. So here we go. So again, this is quite common an occurrence for this location. There is a lot of Russian targets here for taking out. We're talking barracks, depots, airfields, you name it. And not to mention some of the time, let's say, put a figure on it, 15% of the time, it's just Ukrainian locals causing havoc for the Russian forces here, with their homegrown saboteur attacks. Then just a little bit north of here in Verbova. So here it is, just near the front line. In fact, let's just, because I've zoomed in for context, so that's about 7 kilometers or about 4 miles. So Ukrainian forces hit and destroyed a Russian base, destroying 10 or more pieces of heavy equipment, along with a not yet determined amount of Russian soldiers as well. So basically the AFU, or the Armed Forces of Ukraine, look to continue to keep the Russian armed forces under the thumb here in the Zaporizhia Oblast. So now we'll move across to Kherson, where Kherson City, recently liberated Kherson City, there were missile strikes occurred at the very center of Kherson, at the Kherson Regional State Administrative Building. So to me, this is another classic case of Russia being unable to hold their position. So what do? Shell it, of course. But having said that, as you can see, it wasn't even done particularly effectively at all, as it was damaged but not destroyed. And then, speaking of things, well, destroyed in this case, a Russian FSB base was destroyed in a Ukrainian missile attack down a little bit, well, quite further south at Zalizny. Just got to find that one. Oh, there it is. More of a port location there. It's called Zalizny Port. But also, the same basic thing happened as well at Novotroitsk, which is on the main arterial. Just got to find that. And there we go. So great, there we are. So yeah, like I say, more explosions reported yet again, likely at an ammo depot this time, just the way that the explosions were reported, just constantly going off. And then generally, to me, it almost feels like these are mop-up crew strikes on the southern end here, as Ukraine has now taken the north end of the oblast and are really looking to time it quite right, like they seem to always do, to eventually take more and huge swaths of land on the south and, fingers crossed, obviously, the remainder of Kherson. Then we'll move by to nearby Odessa, where air defenses shot down 2 drones over the region. These were the Iranian-made Shahid drones, and one of them even said, it had it written on its tail, in Russian, for Ryazan, which you might remember was the Russian airfield in the oblast of the same name that the Russian oblast of the same name that Ukraine successfully took out a few days back. I'm just thinking, here it is. So it's all the way over here, which is an impressive show of Ukraine's strike capability, really, just in terms of range. That is about 450 kilometers, or about 300 odd miles from the Ukrainian border as the crow flies. So kudos to them. Then we'll move across to some news for today. So 64 Ukrainian servicemen were released from Russian captivity, which is nice to see. So this happened in the last day. Then in some other news, the European Parliament finally approved an 18 billion euro macro financial aid package to Ukraine after striking a deal with Hungary to drop its veto. So that country seemed to be slowing down the deal a bit, potentially rubbing shoulders with Mr. Putin. But that's all been resolved now, so that's really nice to see. Then in some other lighter news, so in Kharkiv in Ukraine, subway stations are gearing up for Christmas festivities underground. It's good to keep it cheery no matter what. Then I've got a couple of funnies to round it off with. I'll just quickly tell you before I get into these. I'm actually getting a bit of a backlog of funnies, so it's just too many good ones. So if you don't mind me spamming you with a few more at the end of the video, just let me know in the comments and I'll do more and more. But I won't spend 10 hours on the thing. So the first funny, so a Russian state media outlet just released this footage of, quote, newly destroyed Ukrainian radar by a Zala drone. But okay, one problem with this is that it's looking really dry here. Pretty sunny too. Not muddy, not rainy, not even autumn, and certainly not snowy, let alone just 10 days before Christmas. So realistically, it's old footage. Could be 6 months ago from the beginning of the war. And this appears to be, again, just some more Russian propaganda where they really do sometimes live in their own echo chamber of self-congratulatory make-believe land sometimes. But I haven't even mentioned my favorite little funny about the video yet, so maybe this one's just for me, but about 13 seconds into the video, the corner blurring accidentally gives way, revealing a small figure, 33.050624. And for any geography enthusiast out there, you'll quickly guess that this is either longitude or latitude. Now, feel free to pop this number into Google with an east or west prefix because it's actually a latitude. And you could just, for some dummy data for the longitude, you could put in 50 degrees north. And you'll see it's smack bang Ukraine. Then if you want to go one step further, check the weather conditions in any of these regions that pop up on your Google Maps in the last few days or weeks or even months for that matter. Rainy, muddy, snowy. So the point I'm trying to make here is that Russia isn't even trying that hard anymore with their propaganda. It's like they've just checked out mentally. And on this channel, you know what we like to say, Russia, just give up already. Then in the last funny for the day, so this one's for the Belgorod Oblast in Russia. So Russia are continuing to build new lines of defense during the winter. This is just bizarre. Of course, you can see it's designed to defend against a land-based invasion, and in many ways like a World War I era land-based invasion. I think in some ways it just comes down to the Russian mindset doing this. So Russia thinks that everybody else just thinks the same way that they do. So for instance, Russia will invade another country if they think that they can. So it would expect that really the same of its neighbor, no matter how untrue that would be. And I love having a laugh at Russian logic sometimes. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.